everyone, I'm Cassie and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to bake an apricot pound cake, and this is an apricot nectar pound cake. Okay, so I've already pre-measured my sugar. It's 2 1/4 cup of white granulated sugar, which I've already measured and placed in my mixing bowl. And for this one, it calls for 3 sticks of butter, right? Which we know that's going to be 1.5 cups. Right? So I'm gonna, as usual, add my butter to my sugar. And this is one of my favorite cakes to make, especially in the spring and the summer. And this is going to be butter that you have allowed to come to room temperature. All right. So now I'm going to place my blender on stir just to get everything incorporated. Now I'm going to increase my speed to 2 because I would like to cream the butter and the sugar. Increase it to 4. And as usual, when you're creaming your butter and sugar, you just want it to be smooth and creamy, fluffy, almost like ice cream. It usually takes about 4 minutes, no longer than 4 minutes. I'm going to stop the blender and I'm going to scrape the sides of my mixing bowl down. Also, I'm going to scrape the bottom because sometimes the white granulated sugar can just settle on the bottom. Then I'm going to restart my mixer and allow it to continue to flow. And while my cream and butter and sugar are creaming, I'm going to go ahead and crack my eggs. This recipe calls for 5 eggs. And yes, you have to allow the eggs to come to room temperature. And I'm making a habit to crack your eggs just to make sure that there's nothing in them. Because if you add it to your batter, of course, you're going to have to start over. 5 eggs cracked. I'm going to stop it so that you can see just how fluffy it's creamed. We have like 1 minute to go. Now, while I'm waiting on that, I have already measured the flour This calls for 3 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. A little more than what we usually use. And to this, we're going to add a half a teaspoon. I'm not sure if you can see that very well. A half a teaspoon of baking powder. Again, I use the Rumford baking powder. Also use the Tavern Girl if someone asks for it, and then I also have Argo. So it just depends on what the customers want. And also to this one, I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of baking soda. Okay. And also a half a teaspoon of salt. And I did sift my flour. Now what I'm going to do, since I've already used my wooden, my silicone spatula, I'm going to go ahead and take a fork and just mix this dry ingredients, which is your flour, your baking soda, baking powder, and salt. I'm just going to mix these together. It's just like whisking it. I'm just not going to use a whisk to do it. I'm just going to use a fork. Same concept. Just make sure that everything is like evenly distributed when it comes to the dry ingredients. Right? Now that my butter and sugar is creamed, I'm going to add my eggs, and I'm going to add them one at a time. And what you want to do with the eggs is just simply break the yolks and make sure that they are incorporated into the cream, butter, and sugar. You don't want to see any yellow yolk. So then I can add my second egg. And the third egg. The fourth egg. And now I'm going to add my fifth egg. I'm going to increase my speed to 2 because I just had it on stir. It doesn't take much to get your eggs well incorporated into your cream, butter, and sugar. Right. I'm going to stop the mixer, scrape down the sides of my bowl. And the key is to never get in a rush when you're cooking, baking, preparing any meal. Just don't get in a rush. It's all going to come out really, really good. Even if it's your first time. Just be patient, because if you've cooked as long as I have, one thing you're going to learn is that food will tell you what you need to do. You're going to know when it's ready, and you're going to know when it's not ready. And that's a true statement. So I'm going to ramp my speed up to 4. Make sure that everything's incorporated. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my apricot nectar and my flour. So I use the Jumex apricot nectar. You can use whichever nectar is your favorite. or whichever one your local grocer has in stock, which is what I have to do. This isn't the one that I normally use when I'm at home in Mississippi, but of course I work in Alabama, so I have to use what I find here. But I'm sure it's going to work just as fine. All right, so now, as I stated, it's 3 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of baking soda, a half a teaspoon of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of baking soda, and a half a teaspoon of salt, all incorporated as my dry ingredients. 3 sticks of non-salted butter allowed to come to room temperature, 2 1/4 cup of white granulated sugar, creamed, and 5 eggs, which are allowed to come to room temperature, incorporated into my creamed butter and sugar. Now I'm going to add, alternatively, my flour and my apricot nectar. I'm going to add 1 cup of the flour at a time. Well, actually a little over because it's 3 1/4. And I'm going to allow it to first stir because I don't want a flour bag. And then I'm going to ramp up the speed, just slowly. And you're going to add 1 cup of the apricot nectar. Now, I'm using apricot nectar, but if you would like to use peach nectar or mango nectar, it'll work out just as fine. If you want to use a half a cup of apricot brandy and a half a cup of like the passion fruit juice, that works as well. I'm using 1 cup of apricot nectar. So I'm going to add it alternatively, just like I did with my my milk and flour, or if I use the sour cream in the flour. All right, so I'm going to place it on stir first, increase my temperature, or increase my mixer to make sure I'm getting a good mix. Add more flour, stir it in. I'm going to increase the speed. I'm going to add a little more of the nectar. Not all, because remember it was 3 1/4 cup of the flour. So I have to make sure that it goes the distance. Add in another cup of flour. I'll add my remaining nectar. Place it on stir. Increase the speed to 2. And now I'm going to add the remaining flour or dry mix. Okay. I'm going to increase my speed. I'm going to stop my mixer, and I'm going to scrape down the sides of my mixing bowl. Because with this one, you can actually see it. This is a little more flour than what you would usually bake in a cake. So I just scrape the sides, I scrape the bottom, of the mixing bowl, and I fold everything in. Just turning it around and around the bowl, making sure that it all gets incorporated very well into the batter. I'm going to allow it to mix for roughly about 3 to 4 minutes, and I'll pick you back up when it's time to place it in the oven. Okay, I'm going to stop my mixer. I think everything is mixed well. I'm just going to scrape down my mixer and allow it to drip back into my mixing bowl. Now, I'm ready to prepare the cake to transfer from the mixing bowl to the baking pan. All right, so in preparation of my baking pan, and I am using my Nordic Wear Smooth, I'm going to, as you know, spray the pan very well to coat it. Don't forget to spray the flute. Right? Coat it exceptionally well. And you know my trick, or my tip, I'm going to also sprinkle sugar around the pan and around the flute. And this helps also to give you a nice crust on the cake. Some people, I like them crunchy. A lot of people request this. This is just one of my little tips that I learned along the way. One thing I learned about cooking and baking, you can follow someone else's recipe, but you don't always have all of the key steps because they don't really share it. You kind of have to learn how to tweak things for yourself to make it work for you. All right, so I have my baking pan ready. Now, there's one thing I didn't add before I placed it in the oven, and I didn't add it to any of the ingredients prior to. I let everything get mixed well. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some flavor. You can add a box of lemon gelatin if you would like. I'm going to add a teaspoon of lemon flavor to mine. This is a recipe that I have modified, and I'm modifying it even today. Right? So I add that in last, right before it's ready to go in the oven. I'm just going to give it a good stir because I've already mixed it well. If you would like to use vanilla, you can use vanilla. It's whatever you like. You don't want to mix your cakes too long because you don't want them to come out stiff or tough. All right. And I almost forgot my flavor because I'd already wiped this down. Okay. But it still would have came out really well even if I hadn't. Because the original recipe didn't call for flavor. It was just putting in the nectars. If you want to add vanilla pudding to it, you can. It's you know, most people try to do this cake and they usually use the gelatins or the puddings and they use the yellow cake mix. And see, I'm not a cake mix baker. I usually bake everything using all-purpose flour, white lily. But you could also use cake flour if you desire. All right. So I have my baking pan ready, and so now I'm going to transfer my batter to the pan. As usual, you know the deal. I'll just simply go around and around the pan. This just helps when it's flowing, just making sure that it's evenly distributed throughout the pan. And then when it stops to flow, I scrape down the sides and just allow it to continue to flow into the baking pan. Lastly, scrape down the sides really well and the bottom. to make sure that all of your cake batter goes into your baking pan. Right. Okay. I'll just move that out of the way. Now, I have already preheated my oven. My temperature of my oven is already set, but I want to say something before. When it comes to the oven temperature for this cake, the original recipe called for 350 degrees Fahrenheit. You bake your cake for 15 minutes, and after 15 minutes, you lower the temperature to 340 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? That's what the original recipe stated. However, my modification, and that's for 1 hour and 5 minutes on that bake. If it seems like the top of the cake is browning very fast, take a piece of aluminum foil or aluminum foil wrap, base it with butter, and then lay it across the top of the cake, and it will keep the cake from overcooking on the top. Okay? My cake that I'm going to bake today that I've modified, I'm going to bake it at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm going to bake it for an hour and check it every 10 minutes to see how long it's going to actually take the cake to cook, okay, or to bake. So again, you want to do the usual as to move your pan around and tap it to remove any air bubbles. Okay, seems to be fairly well. No air bubbles. And I just shake it, swirl it, mix it, and then I'm going to sit it in my oven on the lower rack, which is the bottom, in the center. And with this one, I don't have to worry about leveling it because that's the smooth baking pan. And a lot of people say, okay, why do you always say, where do you put the pan? Because a lot of times people who are new to baking, they think that they need to put it on the top rack. And then when the cake comes out, it seems like the top is overcooked and the cake's not really baked. I've seen people whose cake come out of the oven and it's like, it doesn't have the crispy crust on it. And that doesn't have anything to do with you. That's because you have a new baking pan, right? You usually get that experience with those baking pans. So I say the things I say and give the tips because we could have some newbies who are itching to learn how to bake, and they've already attempted and they made some errors and things just didn't go according to plan, and they kind of throw in the towel and say, oh well, I won't try it anymore. Just wasted ingredients. So for those who feel like that, I kind of go through the steps and explain everything and give you your alternatives and your substitutions. I'm kind of focus in on, key steps so that you won't be discouraged, and then you can try it at home and see that it works for you. I have a couple of subscribers who email me. They're going to try a couple of recipes, and they're going to share their pictures with us once they get theirs baked and out of the oven. Okay. So while this is baking at 325 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm going to place you on a brief pause, and then I'm going to put up my ingredients, and I'm going to do my due diligence for today, and that is wash the dishes that I've used. I'll pick you up when it's time to bring the cake out of the oven. All right, guys, I've checked the cake. It's baking well. So while it's baking, I'm going to go ahead and prepare the glaze that's going to go on top of it. And that glaze is an apricot glaze. And of course, it's going to be 1 cup of confectioner's sugar. Whichever is your favorite brand. And if you don't have confectionate sugar, you can make some at home. Just get some white granulated sugar, place it in your blender, and blend it. And it'll be very fine. You'll get your white powdered sugar. You don't have to run to the store to purchase any. You can make it at home. All right? So you have 1 cup of confectioner's sugar and 2 tablespoons of the apricot nectar. So basically, there's about another tablespoon in here in case I need it. I've used a whole can of apricot nectar. I don't have to waste anything. Then I'm going to take my wooden spatula and I'm just going to mix it up. And when my cake comes out of the oven, I'm going to drizzle it over the hot cake. And then allow the cake to cool for 10 minutes before transferring it to my cake plate. Now, when you're making your glazes, you have to make them as thick or as thin as you would like them to be, okay? If you like yours runny, like really thin, then 1 cup of confectioner sugar and 2 tablespoons of your apricot nectar, as you can see. If you would like for it to be a little thicker than this, then you can add more of your confectioner sugar, 1 tablespoon at a time, right? If you seem that it's a little too thick, you can add a little more of the apricot nectar to thin it out, right? So you can just go back and forth alternatively until you get your glaze at the perfect consistency, right? I kind of want this one to be runny, so I'm going to leave this as is. And I'll just sit it aside and I'll wait on my cake to come out of the oven. Okay. I'll place you on a brief pause and I'll pick you up when it's time to remove the cake from the oven. Hello guys, I'm back. So now it's time to take the cake out of the oven. And I did put a piece of foil on it so that the top didn't get too brown. Right? And I have been checking it to make sure that it was cooking properly. And as always, when you want to know if your cake is done, or anything for that matter that you bake, you just place a toothpick or a kebab stick in. If it pulls out clean, then your cake is ready. Okay, it's ready. All right. So now I'm going to place it on a rack and I'm going to allow it to cool for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to transfer it to my cake plate. And I've already prepared my icing or the glaze to go on it. And I'm going to glaze it. So I'll place you on a brief pause while the cake cools. And then once I transfer it to the cake plate, I'll be right back with you. Okay, now it's time to place the glaze on the cake. There's no special way to do it. I just whirl it around and let it run down the sides. And what's left, once I have the desired cake glazed the way I want, I'll just pour it in the center where the food is. Just drain it down the middle. Okay. And again, this is an apricot nectar pound cake. If you like peach nectar, you can use the peach nectar. If you like the mango nectar, you can use the mango nectar. You can use whichever nectar you like. I like apricot. All right. So this is the final product. I'll bring the camera over so you can see it. That's the final cake glazed. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of my subscribers for joining me on this bake. If you just stopped by, thank you for joining me, and I hope that you will subscribe. Please click the thumbs up, which is the like button, and what it does is just passes your videos through YouTube so that other viewers can get to see them. It's just part of the logarithm that they have for exposure. If you have a comment, please, or a suggestion, please leave it in the comment section below. If it's positive, of course, I will respond. And if not, I'll just keep struggling until I find the next positive comment. Thanks again for joining me on this bake. My name is Cassie. This is my kitchen, and this is one of my wonderful creations. I will see you guys on the next bake. Thank you.